Hello, everyone. Welcome back to ALEC TV. I'm Catherine Mortensen from ALEC Public Affairs, and we're broadcasting from downtown Atlanta at the 49th annual ALEC meeting. We're so happy to be joined today by our chief economist, Jonathan Williams, and he brings with us a special guest from North Carolina. Do you want to introduce our guest, Jonathan?
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Catherine. And I have the pleasure to introduce my good friend and really longtime friend, Dale Folwell, treasurer of the state of North Carolina, a former legislator, served as Speaker Pro Tem in the North Carolina House when we first met, and was really part of the North Carolina comeback story, which is something that we at ALEC talk a lot about. It's actually been one of our, I think, biggest success stories in the 15 years of us putting together the Rich States, Poor States report, where North Carolina has improved markedly from 26 down to number 2 in the country just recently in terms of our April 15th edition of the release. And so, Treasurer Folwell, thanks so much for being with us this week. And what's the secret sauce? How did North Carolina have such a movement in the right direction? And what can other states learn from your actions?
Well, thank you for having me. But, as a CPA, I can't let you say going down from 26 to number 2. CPA's thinking the other direction. So we're going from 26 up to number 2.
It's improving to number 2. That's right.
And, it comes back to the strategy and the discipline. And a lot of that strategy that was incorporated in North Carolina back in 2010, a lot of that structure came from the ALEC meetings. So, but for ALEC and the breakout sessions and the relationships that people formed, we would not be sitting here talking about this. I brought this chart, which I may not show up for your viewers, but it's very important for them to know that this is the trajectory that we were on as far as the state debt is concerned leading up to 2010. And obviously that is unsustainable to have that kind of debt. It looks like the federal debt. After 2010, this is our new trajectory for the state debt. And as a matter of fact, if you look at that as one picture, you'll see that at the peak of that, we were number 26 in the rich state, poor states. And now we've catapulted up over 12 years to number 2. And I'm also reporting as the state treasurer and the keeper of the public purse that the state debt of North Carolina is going to fall 60% over an 8-year period.
Incredible.
60%. And none of your viewers, unless they live when Calvin Coolidge lived, can remember a time when that happened at any level of government. And when I say this is going to happen, it's not a consultant telling me. 5 of those years are already in the rearview mirror, and 3 of those are already in the oven. So thanks to ALEC and the structure that they provided and the sharing of ideas, either the rich state, poor states, or obviously the unfunded pension healthcare stuff, which I'm very involved in as the keeper of North Carolina's public purse.
Well, that's an incredible story. I mean, you've been a hero of this North Carolina comeback, and, not just on the pension and the OPEB liabilities and the bonded debt, which is just an incredible achievement in its own right. It's so tough to do, state or federal or local level. But at the same time, as this debt was going down, North Carolina was one of the most aggressive tax cutting states in America that became a flat tax state in the last decade or so after Speaker Tillis and your majorities took over after 150 years of really bad tax policy being baked in. And now in the most recent budget, I believe over the next, several years, North Carolina will actually go to a business tax rate of 0, no corporate income tax, the first state in the country to ever do that. So, the critics would say you cut taxes and then you're going to have a budget deficit, you're going to grow debt. How was it that you just worked in the opposite there? Was it a Laffer curve effect, or what was it?
Well, our credit obviously goes to the taxpayers and employers in North Carolina and the legislature, who has had the discipline to execute on all this. But at the end of the day, pushing the power down to the consumer and the business activity of North Carolina is what's produced balanced budgets, surpluses, establishing rainy day funds. We've had a lot of rainy days in North Carolina over the last 12 years, one way or another, giving me the reforms I needed to pay off $2.7 billion of unemployment debt, which turned into a $1 billion surplus within 30 months. And that grew to $4 billion as we entered this COVID era. And we're one of the few states that did not have to borrow money again. So our SUTA and FUTA tax surcharges, something I hope your viewers don't wake up thinking about in the morning. All those surcharges that have been on our businesses since 9/11, they did not come back even during COVID.
So if you were talking to a state legislator, many of whom are watching this broadcast, and they were, let's say, ranked at 26 today in rich states, poor states. What few tangible tools would you say you need to use to get to a place where you can catapult yourself into a number 2 ranking in the coming decade?
Well, the number one thing is, and this is a very North Carolina term, it's sort of like an ain't eating a ham biscuit. It happens one bite at a time. So if any of the people viewing this are thinking there's going to be a revolution, like somebody's going to present me with this fantastic idea that's going to catapult me, that's not going to happen. These are evolutions. These are evolving things. And for example, when I was had my fingerprint on reforming the workers' comp system in North Carolina, that's a fingerprint. The Senator Rucho and all the work that he did on the tax reform, that's a fingerprint. Paying off the unemployment debt, all these are fingerprints that lead up to this type of ranking. But the main thing is to realize that by doing this, we have conserved, and the root word of conservative is to conserve, and the root word of liberal is to liberate. And by conserving, we have now liberated the economy of North Carolina.
How about that? That's quite a success story, isn't it, Catherine?
Yeah, and one thing I was thinking about as you were telling us about North Carolina is we're seeing a huge influx of people from the northern states, a lot of the New York, Illinois, the New England, headed down to North Carolina in recent years. How are they impacting what's happening in your state? Are you providing more services? Have they increased your tax base? What has been the impact of all these new people moving into your state?
It's obviously increased the tax base. The jury is still out about how it actually impacts the electeds of our state,
right?
And what our trends are. Are we blue? Are we red? Are we purple?
Right.
These are all important things. My strategy as the keeper of the public purse is to understand that the blood that runs through me is Quaker, and one of the spices of the Quaker religion is to be fair and just. Fair and just means as long as you talk to citizens like adults and what they hear makes common sense, you're going to be fine. And as you can imagine, in my position, we manage $248 billion at the Treasurer's Office, $250 billion, one of the largest pools of public money in the entire world. And I oftentimes have to say no. But I would say to all your viewers, if you have to say no to somebody, respect them enough to spell it KNOW. Explain to them why you said it. And so that creates, that puts you in a position of not attacking people by saying no, but attacking the problem.
A couple of kind of key takeaways, I think, from our work too, just observing from an outside perspective from a 50-state analysis is, key lessons from rich states, poor states. Taxes don't redistribute income, they redistribute people. Right. And that's a key point. The AOC crowd that wants to redistribute, take from the businesses and give to others. Well, it turns out that when that happens, as we're seeing in New York and California, the states that follow that approach, guess what? People vote with their feet, and they're voting very strongly in favor of states like North Carolina and Texas and Florida and others that are getting tax policy right, that are becoming flat tax states like the 4 new flat tax states we saw this year, and are taking care of their state debt. And the other key lesson I think it teaches us over time is when you look at how do you raise revenue for the long term. Obviously, you have to match it with spending. That's a key trait. You did it right in North Carolina. But, when you look at it, you don't raise taxes by increasing tax rates. You raise taxes by bringing in more taxpayers. And that's, I think, been part of the North Carolina success over time.
And this is a little bit of a nuance, but after the great financial crisis of 2008, because of these payroll surcharges, we were increasing your payroll tax while we were trying to get you to hire people. And I don't want to use the word that's on the tip of my tongue, but as a former motorcycle mechanic, there's a saying for that, well, I will not use on camera, but it was backwards.
Yeah. I got you.
To increase the payroll tax while you're trying to encourage people to hire people was just backwards. So, just getting the incentives aligned in the right direction. And I think that's where we have so much of an opportunity with the lower fixed income people of our communities, because if we can align these incentives, it doesn't matter if you're white, black, or brown, if we can align these incentives so that people can be liberated and get the joy of achievement and upward mobility in their life, it's unimaginable what we can still have left to accomplish in North Carolina.
I love it. I was going to say one last thing. I know you're an economist. I'm not an economist, but I like studying economics because to me, I feel like at its root, what economists do is they look at the people are rational. They make decisions that are always rational.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's sort of the root of what economics is. And so I like what you two do because there's certain principles that apply. And like you said, it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to respond in a way to certain incentives. And the types of reforms you're making, they have clearly worked because people are rational. And, so for me, the kinds of things you're talking about make sense to me. And I appreciate that you're bringing us proof that, in fact, over time, they do work.
Well, they do. And as I said earlier, speaking to people like adults, which we've done.
Right.
And what you hear makes common sense.
Exactly.
Is all
That's
the
right.
voters aren't very high maintenance. That's all they want. They want somebody that, and as I gave a quote to a newspaper back at the end of last year, can you imagine a newspaper calling me for an optimistic quote? I mean, I don't know what they were thinking, but this was my optimistic quote for 2022, Catherine. If public officials are going to stand up and show up, if they can't attack problems without attacking people, then shut the hell up.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
And because that's all people want, because they're facing the highest levels of job, food, health, and educational insecurity and uncertainty in the history of our country. At a snap of a finger, when our governor shut North Carolina down, snap of a finger, the day before, we had 55% of our food going to grocery stores and 45% of our food going to restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
That all had to change. At a snap of a finger.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of transitions and pivots that you have to be able to make. But unfortunately, the belief in government and the government's ability to actually get out of its own way and do something positive for the average people, that's one of the biggest risks we have in our country right now. That and people not being able to see themselves out of their poverty because of healthcare billing, and maybe we can do another show on that someday.
We need to. Well, that's so good. And I know we're running out of time here, Kat, but your point on economics is exactly right. It's about human action and how humans respond to incentives. And of course, government policy, for better or worse, incentivizes or decentivizes other things. And that's the key of it. And when we look at tax policy, for instance, in this case, in North Carolina's case, taxes are the price of doing business or living or working or growing a family or trying to build yourself out of poverty in a state. And why are we setting high prices? I mean, it doesn't make any sense that states like California and New York are setting the price bar here, where states like North Carolina are thriving when they can set the price here. It's all about economics 101.
Yeah.
I'm going to take just one more moment and explain to your viewers that if this is the shape of California, and this is the shape of North Carolina, but for 63 miles, we have as much border with other states as California does. But as smart as you both are, and our camera person, you can't name one major population center in California that borders another state. Think about our state: Asheville, Charlotte, Wilmington, Rocky Mount, Raleigh, Durham, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and Boone. My reason for bringing this to your viewers is that Hayek and von Mises taught us that money does not know where the border is. Money will go where it's invited and stay where it's welcome. So us being the low-cost place to live and do business was economically necessary.
Yeah. Well, I've learned so much. Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Folwell, and of course, Jonathan. We want to thank everyone for watching.
Cameraman.
Yep. We have intern. I always forget your name, so you're gonna have to tell me.
Will Busquet. Will Busquet.
Will Busquet gets a shout out. He's from New York City. He is a rising sophomore at Oberlin College studying economics. So, Will, maybe in 10 or 20 years, you'll be here.
And he's a University of Michigan fan, so it all works out well.
That works out.
Yeah.
And he blushes. He's got the whole package.
Oh, thanks for helping out with us. And thank you for watching. And we will see you back on the next ALEC TV video.